She laughed at the human student until his earthly origin was revealed. The academy floated above a planet-sized station in orbit around a distant star, a hub where the brightest minds and the strongest bodies from dozens of species came to learn and train. Kale had heard stories about this place, read about its reputation, and imagined he could handle it, but nothing could prepare him for the reality. He walked slowly through the corridors, his human legs adjusting to the low gravity of the station. Most students moved with a graceful ease, their strides long and quick, their bodies clearly used to the artificial gravities of training rooms that simulated the heaviest planets in the galaxy. Kale's own steps were short, careful, and steady. Every eye seemed to follow him, studying his movements with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "Look at him," a voice whispered near the entrance to the main hall. Kale didn't turn, but he heard the laughter that followed. It wasn't loud, but it carried the sharp edge of mockery. When he reached the main auditorium, he saw her, Lyra, a student from Clitheris Prime, known for producing some of the most disciplined and capable warriors in the sector. Her skin shimmered like liquid bronze, and her eyes were a deep violet that seemed to pierce straight through him. She had already spotted him and had no hesitation in making it clear to everyone around that he was a target. Kale tried not to react. He had learned early in life that showing fear or anger only made things worse. The academy was not like Earth, where he had sometimes been the strongest in his class. Here, strength came in so many forms: speed, intellect, agility, endurance, and even the ability to adapt to environments that seemed impossible to survive. Humans were rare and few understood them. Most assumed they were weak. The first lessons began with physical training. The instructors were tall, imposing beings from a species called Draxians, whose legs were long enough to reach the top of the training platforms without effort. They moved with a speed and precision that Kale had never seen. "Let's see what the humans can do," one of them muttered in a low voice as Kale stepped forward. The comment was not malicious, but it carried doubt. Kale placed his feet on the platform, feeling the uneven vibrations beneath him. His muscles tensed, and he focused on balance. He was not fast, but he was steady. The exercises required running through complex obstacle courses, climbing walls, and using strength to manipulate heavy objects. Kale struggled at first. He stumbled, almost losing his footing several times. Some of the other students snickered. Lyra laughed openly, her voice echoing across the hall. It was not loud, but it carried a confidence that made the mockery worse. "You'll never make it," she said, her tone sharp but amused. "Earth, really. I've trained with infants stronger than your kind." Others around her nodded in agreement, and Kale felt the weight of their judgment, but he did not respond. Instead, he focused on the task, adjusting his grip, finding new ways to shift his weight, and using his body in ways that seemed awkward but worked. It was slow, and he did not keep pace with the fastest students, but he did not fail completely. By the end of the first session, he had completed the course, though at the bottom of the rankings. Lyra, however, did not leave it at that. During the midday break, she approached him, her steps silent despite the gravity field. "I've never seen someone move like that," she said, her eyes studying him with curiosity mixed with disdain. "It's strange. Slow, weak, but somehow not completely hopeless. How is your planet even considered habitable?" Kale looked up at her, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Earth is habitable," he said simply. "It's challenging. It makes people adaptable, strong in ways you might not understand yet." She raised an eyebrow. "Adaptable, that doesn't help you here. You'll be crushed in real training. You're too soft. Your body, it's nothing compared to mine or any of the others here." Kale said nothing more, only nodded slightly and turned away. He felt no need to argue. Words would not convince her, nor the dozens of other students who watched the exchange. His actions would speak louder than any explanation he could give. The afternoon lessons focused on tactics and strategy. Here, Kale found a small advantage. While other students relied on raw power or instinct, he observed patterns carefully, noting the way opponents moved, how obstacles were placed, and the timing of each instructor's instructions. During simulated battles, Kale often appeared slow at first. Other students rushed in, expecting to overwhelm him, but he anticipated their moves. He dodged, countered, and used the environment to his advantage. By the end of the simulation, he had scored higher than many students who were physically stronger and faster. Lyra noticed. Her amusement faded slightly, replaced by curiosity. "How did you do that?" she asked after one simulation, her voice quieter than before. "You moved slower than the rest, but somehow you didn't fail." Kale shrugged. "Observation helps. Understanding patterns makes action more effective. Speed alone isn't enough." He said it calmly, without pride, as though it were obvious. Throughout the week, the pattern continued. The other students laughed at his awkwardness, mocked his unusual movements, and whispered about how soft humans must be. Kale endured, never retaliating. Yet slowly, very slowly, the whispers changed. Some students began to notice his endurance. He never tired as quickly as others thought he would. In long training exercises that lasted hours, he kept moving, barely slowing down, while some of the stronger species began to falter. When obstacles required careful problem-solving, Kale excelled, finding solutions others ignored or dismissed. Lyra watched all of this with growing disbelief. She had assumed humans were easy to dismiss, their worlds soft and their bodies fragile. Every time she tried to find a flaw, the human student seemed to adapt, using his perceived weaknesses as advantages. It was frustrating and intriguing at the same time. By the end of the first week, a challenge was announced. A group exercise pairing students of different species in simulated survival conditions. Kale was paired with two other students, one from a high-gravity planet and another from a species known for intelligence but frailty. At first, the pair doubted him, assuming he would slow them down. But when the simulation began, Kale immediately started observing. He noticed the dangers others missed, found safer paths, and anticipated changes in the simulated environment that the others had not considered. When a sudden collapse blocked their intended route, Kale guided the team through an alternate path efficiently, keeping them safe while maintaining steady progress. Afterward, Lyra approached him again. This time, her expression was different, less mocking, more perplexed. You're different from what I expected," she said quietly. "Your movements, your choices, I don't understand why they work." Kale looked at her calmly. "Earth is a difficult place. We learn to survive in ways that may seem strange to others. Sometimes what looks weak is actually a strategy. Sometimes what seems slow is careful observation." Her eyes narrowed, studying him with a new intensity. She was still proud, still competitive, but a hint of respect began to creep in. The human from a supposedly soft, weak world had not only survived, but had shown capabilities that defied expectations. She realized that laughing at him had been premature. The rest of the week passed in a blur of lessons, simulations, and endless training. Kale faced ridicule daily, endured challenges, and quietly proved himself. His human resilience, honed on a planet of extremes, began to shine. Other students began to notice too. Not openly, not yet, but they whispered among themselves, curiosity and doubt mixing in their voices. By the time the first week ended, Kale had not won any awards. He had not even reached the top of any ranking charts. But he had done something far more important. He had survived, observed, and adapted in ways the other students could not yet fully understand. And Lyra, who had laughed at him from the very beginning, found herself unable to dismiss him any longer. For the first time, she felt a flicker of uncertainty about what she thought she knew. She had always assumed humans were soft, weak, and easily defeated. But standing there, watching Kale move through the corridors of the academy with calm determination, She began to wonder if Earth's children were far more dangerous than anyone had believed. Perhaps there was strength hidden in places she had ignored. Perhaps the human from a so-called soft world was more than just a survivor. Perhaps he was the beginning of a lesson she would never forget. As the sun, or rather the artificial light of the Academy's orbiting station, shifted to mark the end of the first week, Kale walked alone through the quiet training halls. He did not celebrate. He did not boast. He simply kept moving, steady and observant, learning, adapting, and preparing. Lyra watched him from a distance, her laughter replaced by a thoughtful silence. And somewhere deep down, a seed of respect began to grow, even if she did not yet realize it. The academy would be difficult, the challenges unending, and the other students relentless in their assumptions. But Kale, the human from Earth, had already begun to change the way they thought. One small step at a time, he would prove that humans were not weak. They were adaptable, resilient, unpredictable, and perhaps, in ways the galaxy had not yet measured, they were capable of more than anyone could imagine. The days after Kale's first week at the Interstellar Academy became a test of patience, endurance, and intellect. Though he had survived the initial mockery, the alien students were far from done. They observed him closely now, their whispers tinged with both curiosity and skepticism. Lyra, the Clitheris prime student, was no exception. Her amusement had faded, replaced by an unfamiliar tension she could not quite name. Humans were supposed to be weak, soft, easily outmatched. Yet Kale continued to demonstrate something she could not ignore. Classes grew more complex. Advanced physics, interstellar navigation, and zero-gravity combat training occupied every waking hour. Kale struggled at first, not because he lacked intelligence, but because the methods assumed a species with very different physical and cognitive instincts. His alien classmates could calculate trajectories instinctively, their minds trained for multidimensional thinking since birth. Kale had to slow down, analyze, and reason in ways that sometimes seemed inefficient, but he persisted. His determination, unlike the others' raw talent, was quiet, consistent, and relentless. During one particular combat simulation, students were dropped into a low-gravity environment with unpredictable obstacles. Their task was simple in theory: navigate the terrain, locate energy cores, and secure them. But in practice, it was chaos. Students from heavier worlds struggled with the shifting gravity, overshooting jumps and losing balance. Kale, accustomed to constant struggle on Earth, moved differently. He felt the momentum of his body, adjusted his balance, and conserved energy. While others wasted strength in repeated failed jumps, he found smoother paths. He was slower in appearance, but he arrived at the objective efficiently with cores intact. His success was quiet, not flashy, but undeniable. Lyra watched, her violet eyes narrowing as she tried to understand. She had expected him to fail, perhaps even embarrass himself. Yet here he was, performing in ways she had not anticipated. Something about the human style unsettled her. He did not match her speed, nor the strength of the heavier species, yet he adapted, turned mistakes into advantage, and seemed almost untouchable in his calmness. The realization that he might be better than she had assumed sparked a mixture of irritation and curiosity. The next day, the Academy introduced interspecies strategy sessions. Students were divided into mixed teams and given challenges that required both intellect and instinct. Kale's group included a species with 4 arms, renowned for engineering skills, and a winged species with unmatched agility. They were tasked with constructing a rapid-response defensive system for a simulated colony under attack. The others immediately assumed Kale's role would be minimal. He was, after all, a human from the soft world they all mocked. Kale listened quietly as the others debated. He did not interrupt or assert himself, allowing the more vocal students to outline their plans. But he observed every detail, every assumption, every oversight. When the discussion seemed to hit a dead end, Kale spoke. His voice was calm, almost unassuming, but each point he made was precise and practical. He suggested using natural environmental patterns to anticipate attack vectors, incorporating the station's gravity shifts to their advantage, and distributing the energy cores efficiently to prevent overload. His ideas were simple, clear, and effective. The winged student initially scoffed, certain that Kale's suggestions were naive, but as the simulation progressed, they worked flawlessly. Lyra observed from across the room. Her previous mockery had transformed into quiet skepticism. She could not deny the results, but she wrestled with the uncomfortable realization that humans, though physically different, had a kind of intelligence that could not be measured in speed, strength, or traditional training metrics. There was a pattern to Kale's calmness, a rhythm that spoke of experience, survival, and adaptation honed in conditions she could barely imagine. Outside of formal training, Kale's presence began to influence the academy in subtle ways. Other students started observing him quietly, noting how he handled fatigue, pressure, and unexpected variables. He never complained, never rushed, and never tried to impress. Yet the results spoke for themselves. During exercises designed to test endurance, he consistently outlasted heavier and seemingly stronger competitors. During problem-solving sessions, his predictions and strategies often succeeded where others had failed. And all the while, he maintained a quiet humility, never boasting, never flaunting his success. One evening, Kale found himself paired with Lyra in a specialized simulation. They were dropped into a hazardous asteroid field where the objective was to retrieve a rare energy crystal without triggering the field's defensive systems. Lyra moved quickly, relying on her strength and reflexes, but Kale's movements were careful, measured, and deliberate. He anticipated the shifts in gravity and the unpredictable movements of the asteroids. While Lyra nearly triggered an alarm, Kale guided both of them to the crystal safely. When they emerged, Lyra was silent, her pride clashing with the undeniable truth. The human had saved them. For the first time, she spoke without mockery. How do you do that?" Her voice was low, almost hesitant. "You move slower than I would, yet you succeed." Kale simply shrugged. "Earth is difficult. We learn to survive in ways others don't. It teaches patience, observation, and adaptation. Speed and strength are not always enough." The statement lingered in Lyra's mind. She had trained all her life to be fast, strong, and decisive. She had never needed to consider patience or subtlety in the same way humans did. Yet Kale's quiet method was effective, undeniable, and increasingly difficult to ignore. She realized she had underestimated the human from the very start. Over the next several weeks, the Academy introduced simulations designed to test the limits of all students. Environments varied from extreme heat to crushing gravity, from intense storms to zero-visibility situations. Kale faced challenges that would have crushed unprepared students. He adjusted, adapted, and learned quickly. His body, though seemingly less robust than others, endured conditions that would have exhausted his peers. His mind, trained by observation and critical thinking, allowed him to anticipate outcomes and act with efficiency. The human student from a so-called soft world was thriving in ways the Academy had never expected. One day, Lyra approached Kale directly, outside of class. Her usual confidence was tempered with an unusual caution. "Tell me," she began, "what is Earth really like? Not the stories we read, not the data files, they don't match what you do here." Kale looked at her calmly, his expression neutral. "Earth is challenging," he said. "It has extremes, storms, predators, disease, conflict. Life is never easy. We adapt because we must. Every generation learns to survive against circumstances that might break others. It teaches endurance, strategy, and resilience. That is what you see here." Lyra frowned. "You make it sound harsh." "It is," Kale replied simply. And that is why humans endure in ways others may underestimate. We are not the fastest, the strongest, or the most instinctively powerful, but we survive, we adapt, we think, we endure. The weight of his words settled over her. She had never considered a planet so soft that humans came from it. She had simply accepted the Academy's files, which were outdated and incomplete. Now, standing before someone who embodied what they said was impossible, she began to understand the truth. Humans were different, yes, but not weak. They were honed by struggle in a way that no artificial training could replicate. During the next simulation, Kale faced the ultimate test of adaptability. The instructors announced a surprise crisis. A sudden system failure in the Academy's main training module created a cascading series of challenges. Gravity shifted unexpectedly, environmental hazards intensified, and communication systems were partially disabled. Panic spread quickly among the students, who relied heavily on precise instructions and familiar routines. Kale, however, did not panic. He observed, calculated, and acted with calm precision. Lyra was near him during the chaos. She had initially relied on her instincts, rushing forward with strength and speed, but found herself struggling against the unexpected variables. Kale guided her, using subtle cues and strategic positioning to navigate the dangers. His understanding of patterns, anticipation of movements, and quiet decisiveness allowed both of them to reach safety while others faltered. Lyra could no longer doubt what she saw. The human was not only enduring, he was excelling in ways no one had predicted. After the crisis, the instructors debriefed the students. Many praised their own species for surviving the unexpected challenges. Lyra, unusually quiet, watched Kale as he stood calmly, explaining his actions succinctly, without pride or exaggeration. The instructors, too, noted the human's performance. They had assumed humans were weak, unprepared, and easily outmatched. Kale had proven them wrong, quietly, without fanfare, through results alone. In the days that followed, the Academy's perception of Kale began to shift. Whispers of disbelief became murmurs of respect. Students who once mocked him now observed him, curious to learn from his methods. Lyra, too, struggled with her feelings of pride and humility. She had laughed at him, dismissed him, and yet here he was, proving that Earth had produced something truly remarkable. Kale did not change. He did not flaunt his growing reputation, nor did he seek recognition. He moved through the Academy with the same quiet determination, observing, learning, and adapting. And slowly, piece by piece, he began to reshape the understanding of humans in the galaxy, not as weak, soft beings, but as resilient, adaptable, and capable in ways few could imagine. By the end of the second part of the term, Kale had achieved something subtle but profound. He had survived and thrived without conforming to expectations. The mockery had faded into reluctant acknowledgement. The Academy, known for judging students by appearances and assumptions, had begun to see a new truth. Humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and remarkably resilient. And those who had underestimated him, especially Lyra, had begun to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the so-called soft world called Earth. The weeks at the Interstellar Academy passed with relentless intensity. Kale had adapted to the rigorous schedule, the complex lessons, and the subtle scrutiny of his peers. Yet he knew that adaptation alone was not enough. The Academy was not merely a place for physical or intellectual prowess. It was a crucible where the limits of each species were measured, tested, and exposed. Kale's abilities, born of Earth's harsh conditions, were quietly emerging as something extraordinary, but many still could not see the true depth of his endurance and strategy. Lyra was among those whose perception of him had begun to shift. The initial laughter and mockery had faded into a quiet, almost reluctant curiosity. She had begun observing Kale closely, noting his methods, his patience, and his uncanny ability to predict outcomes. Unlike other students who relied on instinct, raw strength, or flashy maneuvers, Kale acted deliberately, anticipating consequences and using each environment to his advantage. The turning point came when the Academy scheduled a historical and cultural exchange session. Students were required to present their home planets, beyond the official files, beyond the statistics, and share the realities of life there. Most species relied on prideful exaggerations or sanitized reports, speaking of their achievements and strength while omitting hardship. Kale, however, had prepared differently. He did not seek to impress. He sought to reveal truth. When it was Kale's turn to speak, a quiet tension fell over the room. The species present had heard of Earth, though most considered it insignificant, a soft and unthreatening planet. Lyra, now sitting near the front, leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. Kale began simply, his voice calm, measured yet carrying the weight of authenticity. Earth is not soft, he said. It is not a place designed for comfort. It is a planet of extremes, where survival requires constant adaptation, intelligence, and endurance. Life is never easy there. Every human grows up learning that the world can break you at any moment if you are not careful. The students exchanged skeptical glances. They had seen Kale struggle with gravity exercises, with speed drills. Many could not reconcile the awkward, deliberate movements they had mocked with the story he was telling. Lyra's brow furrowed. She had assumed weakness. She had assumed softness. The human before her, however, had a quiet authority in his words that demanded attention. Kale continued. He spoke of Earth's gravity, heavier than most planets in the galaxy. It shapes our bodies, he said. Our bones, muscles, and endurance are built for constant challenge. We run, climb, fight, and survive. Every obstacle teaches adaptation. Every failure is a lesson. Every success is earned. He described storms that could flatten entire cities, predators that required constant vigilance, and natural disasters that shaped generations of survival strategies. Earth is harsh, he said simply. It teaches humans to endure, to think, to adapt. That is why we survive in ways that seem impossible to others. The room was silent. Many students were trying to reconcile the Kale they had trained with, the human who appeared slower, smaller, and weaker, with the reality he described. Lyra's violet eyes widened as she realized the truth behind the calm determination she had observed. He was not merely enduring. He had been shaped by conditions far more extreme than the Academy's simulations. The human from a so-called soft world had learned survival in the most uncompromising ways imaginable. Kale did not stop there. He shared stories of cooperation, intelligence, and innovation. He spoke of humans developing strategies, not only for survival against the environment, but also against each other when necessary. He described societies where adaptation was the key to longevity, where every failure taught a lesson, and where the weak did not survive, not through cruelty, but through natural consequence. Lyra found herself drawn in despite her pride. She had always measured strength through immediate performance, speed, reflexes, strength, endurance under predictable conditions. Humans, she realized, measured strength differently. It was subtle, cumulative, and unyielding. It was endurance not just of the body, but of the mind and spirit. Kale's words painted a picture of a species that could thrive in any situation because they had been tested, generation after generation, by circumstances harsher than the Academy could simulate. After the session, murmurs filled the halls. Students who had mocked Kale now spoke in quiet tones of disbelief and respect. His words had changed something fundamental. They had forced the Academy to reconsider what they thought they knew about Earth. Lyra remained silent, processing the revelation. She realized she had not been laughing at weakness. She had been laughing at restraint, at a species that disguised its true strength beneath a calm exterior. In the following days, Kale's training took on a new dimension. The instructors, curious and cautious, began to challenge him with scenarios designed to push him beyond expectations. They simulated extreme gravity conditions, environmental hazards, and strategic crises. Each time, Kale adapted, moving with precision, endurance, and intelligence. His human physiology, honed by Earth's extreme conditions, allowed him to thrive in situations that crippled others. His mind, trained by observation and critical thinking, enabled him to anticipate outcomes and act decisively. Lyra could no longer deny his capabilities. During one particularly grueling exercise, the Academy simulated a catastrophic energy surge in the station's power systems. Students were required to navigate unstable modules, repair critical conduits, and coordinate evacuations. Panic quickly spread among the more fragile species, who relied heavily on structured routines. Kale, however, remained calm. He analyzed the situation, predicted the sequence of failures, and moved with deliberate precision. He guided others to safety, stabilized damaged modules, and ensured the simulation ended with minimal loss. When the exercise concluded, the instructors praised several species for their ingenuity and speed, but it was Kale who had quietly ensured the survival of the entire group. Lyra, standing nearby, felt a mix of awe and frustration. She had trained all her life to be the fastest, the strongest, the most decisive. Yet Kale, with no need for display or pride, had outperformed everyone, not through instinct or raw talent, but through patience, adaptation, and endurance shaped by a world she had underestimated. The shift in perception among the students was subtle but growing. Those who had whispered doubts about humans began observing Kale closely. They noted how he conserved energy, how he anticipated dangers, and how he remained calm under pressure. His results were undeniable, yet his approach was foreign to most species. They had been trained to measure strength through immediate action, flashy displays, and instinctual responses. Humans measured strength through endurance, strategy, and survival against extremes. Lyra, for her part, struggled with her feelings. Pride and competitiveness warred with respect and curiosity. She had once laughed at Kale, certain of his inferiority. Now, she could not ignore his abilities. She realized that her assumptions had been entirely wrong. Earth, which she had dismissed as soft, had produced a species capable of thriving in conditions that would challenge even the most advanced training simulations. The true test came when the Academy announced a multi-day survival challenge on an uninhabited asteroid cluster. Students were to work in teams to secure resources, establish defensive perimeters, and endure unpredictable environmental hazards. Kale was assigned a team of mixed species, many of whom had doubted him from the start. Lyra reluctantly partnered with him, watched as he calmly assessed the situation. The challenge was brutal. Gravity fluctuated, temperature extremes tested endurance, and sudden storms threatened to overwhelm unprepared teams. Many students faltered, unable to adapt quickly enough. Kale, however, moved with deliberate caution, observing patterns, conserving energy, and guiding his team through the chaos. He anticipated environmental shifts, redistributed resources efficiently, and maintained morale through quiet leadership. By the end of the challenge, Kale's team had not only survived, they had excelled. Resources were secured, perimeters intact, and every member accounted for. Other teams struggled and some failed entirely. Lyra, exhausted yet impressed, realized that her initial assumptions had been completely wrong. Humans were not weak. They were forged in a crucible far harsher than the Academy could replicate, and their strength was subtle, pervasive, and unyielding. That evening, as the students gathered to debrief, Kale spoke once again of Earth, not to boast but to explain. He described a world of extremes, of survival against relentless conditions, of adaptation honed over millennia. He explained how humans learn to endure, to think strategically, and to survive in ways that might seem impossible to others. The room was silent, the students absorbing a reality they had never considered. Lyra, standing at the edge of the assembly, felt a profound shift within herself. She had laughed at the human student, certain of his inferiority. Now she understood that he embodied qualities her own species had rarely cultivated. He was not the fastest, nor the strongest in conventional measures, but he was resilient, adaptable, and unyielding. He had survived the impossible and thrived where others had struggled. By the end of Part 3, the Academy's perception of humans had begun to change. Whispers of doubt were replaced by murmurs of respect. Kale had not sought recognition, yet he had earned it through quiet persistence and extraordinary adaptability. Lyra, once his most vocal critic, now regarded him with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and something approaching admiration. For the first time, the human student from Earth was no longer seen as weak or soft. He was a living testament to the resilience of his species, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that strength came in many forms, forms the galaxy had yet to fully understand. And for those who had doubted him, especially Lyra, the realization was undeniable. Humans were not only capable, they were extraordinary. The Academy had prepared its final trial for the term, a challenge that would test every student in ways that combined endurance, intelligence, and leadership. Kale, now recognized quietly among his peers, knew that this would be different. It was not just a simulation or a controlled exercise. It was a test of adaptability under crisis, designed to push every species to their absolute limits. He observed the preparations calmly, noting the environment that would soon become unpredictable and hazardous. The instructors gathered the students and explained the scenario. A sudden system failure had compromised the Academy's life support modules. Oxygen levels fluctuated in some sectors, gravity fields became unstable, and simulated predators, engineered for controlled danger, roamed the training zones. Teams were tasked with restoring stability, ensuring survival, and protecting all participants. Failure was not just measured in points. It could mean the loss of a sector, simulated casualties, and critical penalties in ranking. Kale's team was a mixture of species, each with their strengths and weaknesses. Lyra was assigned to him again, and although her pride had shifted into respect, she remained competitive. Others relied on their strength, speed, or specialized abilities, but Kale understood something deeper. Survival was not about who could hit hardest or run fastest. It was about understanding the system, anticipating dangers, and coordinating with every member effectively. The moment the trial began, chaos erupted. Gravity fields fluctuated unpredictably, knocking heavier species off balance. Storm simulations created sudden blinding debris, while automated hazards forced students to react instantly. Many panicked, attempting to rely solely on instinct or brute force. Kale, however, moved with deliberate caution. He observed patterns in the system failures, predicted how the environment would shift, and began issuing quiet instructions to his team. "Use the low-gravity corridor," he suggested calmly to Lyra. "It will be safer, and we can conserve energy. Winged species assist with reaching high conduits. Everyone else, monitor your oxygen levels and follow the path I mark." At first, some resisted. They had been trained to act quickly, aggressively, without waiting. But Kale's calm authority carried a weight they could not ignore. His reasoning was simple, direct, and effective. Slowly, his team began following his guidance. As they navigated the hazardous zones, obstacles appeared at every turn. A collapsing support beam threatened to crush half the team. Kale calculated its trajectory, moving with a precise timing that allowed everyone to dodge the debris safely. Lyra, relying on her instinct, had moved too quickly and nearly faltered. Kale reached her hand in time, steadying her before she lost balance. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to acknowledge the human's unshakable composure. The simulation continued to escalate. A sudden energy surge destabilized several modules, cutting off communication lines. Teams elsewhere panicked, unable to coordinate. Kale, however, adapted quickly. He created a simple signal system using lights and movement, guiding his team through the chaos. He assessed each member's abilities, delegating tasks efficiently, and ensuring no one was left behind. Every action was deliberate, every decision grounded in observation and logic. Hours passed, though time seemed distorted under the intensity of the simulation. Kale's team moved steadily, avoiding hazards, stabilizing modules, and keeping morale high. His endurance became evident. Unlike other species who fatigued under prolonged stress, Kale remained alert and capable. He adjusted his movements to conserve energy, relying on technique and anticipation rather than raw power. His human body, honed by years of extreme conditions on Earth, functioned efficiently under pressure. At one point, a structural collapse blocked their path to a critical control panel. Most students would have panicked or attempted a direct, risky approach. Kale assessed the situation, noting weaknesses in the debris alignment and calculating the safest route. With precise movements, he navigated through a narrow gap, signaling the others to follow. When the team reached the panel, Kale directed their actions in restoring the system. His instructions were clear, logical, and executed flawlessly. The control module stabilized, and oxygen levels normalized for the sector. By the end of the first phase, Kale's team had not only survived but had made measurable progress where others had struggled or failed. The instructors, observing from monitoring stations, took note. The human's ability to remain calm, adapt quickly, and lead without arrogance was extraordinary. Many had assumed humans were fragile, ill-prepared, and unsuitable for high-stress scenarios. Kale had proven every assumption wrong. Lyra, standing beside him as they regrouped, finally spoke. I underestimated you," she admitted, her voice quiet but sincere. "I thought your species was weak, soft, incapable. I see now I was wrong. You led us through this. You were steady when everyone else panicked." Kale nodded, his expression calm. Earth teaches endurance. It teaches adaptation. Strength is not always in muscle or speed. Sometimes it is patience, observation, and understanding. Every member of the team contributed. I only guided what was already there. Her respect deepened. She had been proud, competitive, and dismissive. Now she understood that true strength was not always visible at first glance. Humans, shaped by the harsh conditions of their homeworld, possessed a resilience and intelligence that exceeded conventional measures. Kale's calm authority, endurance, and ability to adapt under pressure revealed a capability that few in the galaxy had experienced firsthand. The second phase of the trial was even more challenging. Students faced simulated environmental disasters, extreme temperature fluctuations, sudden vacuum exposure, and shifting gravity storms. Teams were required to coordinate across multiple sectors, using limited resources to restore critical systems. Many species struggled, failing to adjust to conditions outside their comfort zones. Kale, however, analyzed each situation carefully, moving deliberately, and using his human intuition to anticipate failures before they occurred. When a sudden collapse of a gravity field trapped part of his team in a malfunctioning sector, Kale acted immediately. He assessed the weight distribution, calculated the safest angle for traversal, and guided his teammates through the unstable area. Others had tried direct force, attempting to lift or push through, but Kale's method was precise, conserving energy and ensuring no one was injured. The efficiency and effectiveness of his approach impressed even the instructors. By the final phase, Kale's team had become a model of coordination, adaptability, and resilience. Other teams struggled to recover from errors, while Kale's group maintained calm and steady progress. His quiet leadership allowed members of different species, previously skeptical or dismissive, to contribute effectively. Lyra, once his fiercest critic, now relied on his guidance, acknowledging not only his skill but the underlying philosophy of human endurance and strategy. When the trial concluded, the instructors reviewed the results. Several species had excelled in individual metrics, displaying speed, reflexes, or brute strength. But Kale's team had demonstrated consistent success across every measure: survival, coordination, efficiency, and adaptability. The human student from Earth, once dismissed as weak, had not only led his team effectively, but had done so under conditions that exposed the limits of many other species. In the debriefing session, Kale spoke again, calmly summarizing the human approach. Strength is not always immediate. Endurance, observation, and adaptation are equally vital. Humans have learned these lessons over generations on a world of extremes. We survive because we endure, we think because we must, and we act because survival demands it. The room was silent. Even the most skeptical students could not dispute the results. Lyra, standing near him, felt a profound shift within herself. She had entered the academy confident in her superiority, ready to mock the human student from Earth. Now she understood that her assumptions had been flawed. Humans, forged by harsh conditions and relentless challenges, possessed a combination of endurance, intelligence, and adaptability that surpassed expectation. The story of Kale's trial spread quietly through the academy. Students whispered of the human who had led under impossible conditions, adapting where others faltered, enduring where others broke. Lyra, now fully aware of the truth, approached Kale privately. "I laughed at you," she admitted. "I thought Earth was soft, your species weak. I see now that I was wrong. You are extraordinary." Kale's response was calm, modest. "Earth shaped us differently, that is all. Strength comes in many forms, not all of which are visible at first glance." The trial's results cemented Kale's reputation. He did not seek recognition, but it was impossible to ignore his achievements. The Academy, known for measuring strength in speed, muscle, or instinct, had been forced to acknowledge a different form of capability: endurance, adaptability, and strategic intelligence. In the days following the trial, students who had once dismissed humans began to observe them differently. Lyra, in particular, became both a student and a peer, learning from Kale's methods while acknowledging her earlier errors. The perception of Earth, previously considered soft and weak, began to shift. Humans were no longer underestimated. They were respected, studied, and quietly feared for their resilience and ingenuity. Kale walked through the academy halls in the aftermath of the trial with quiet confidence. He had not sought to prove anything through display or boastful acts. He had acted as he always did, calmly, deliberately, and with awareness. And in doing so, he had revealed the truth of his species. Humans were capable, adaptable, and resilient in ways the galaxy had not fully appreciated. The final day of the term arrived, and as students celebrated their accomplishments, Kale stood apart, observing. Lyra approached him one last time, her demeanor transformed from mockery to respect. "I laughed at the human student from Earth," she said softly. "I see now that I was wrong. You have shown us all what it means to endure." Kale nodded. "Endurance, observation, and adaptation. That is what humans learn. That is what Earth teaches. And that is why we survive, no matter the challenge." The Academy had changed in subtle ways. The story of Kale's perseverance, intelligence, and endurance spread, quietly altering perceptions of humanity across species. No longer dismissed as weak, humans were now recognized as a species capable of thriving under circumstances that would challenge even the most advanced civilizations. And Kale, the human student who had once been laughed at, had done so without pride or boast. He had simply acted as a human should, calmly, deliberately, and resiliently, revealing a strength that could not be ignored, a resilience that could not be measured by conventional metrics, and a humanity that was extraordinary in every sense. She laughed at the human student until his earthly origin was revealed.